Okay, so here we are back with the DLTX-51 carburetor for the 1949 John Deere, and you can see I painted it silver instead of painting it the traditional John Deere green. I thought I'd see how I like this. I could always repaint it later on if I need to, but in any event, I just thought while I have this apart, it'd be a quick and easy way to kind of explain how carburetors work. So right here, this is the end where the choke is going to go, and I'll show you that here in a minute. But if you can look down inside there, you can see the center part is smaller diameter than the outer part. That part, or the part that goes into the intake. So, but what that does is it's what's called a venturi, and it's kind of hourglass shaped. So as the air goes through here, when it's drawn in from the piston being on the intake stroke, as it gets to that smaller part, the air is compressed, and when the air is compressed, it tends to move faster. Not tends to, it will move faster. So it increases the pressure by squeezing it down through that little tunnel there, and it increases the speed of it as well. Now this little tube right here, I'll put this in here temporarily. If you can see this little brass tube here, that's where the fuel comes up out of the fuel bowl into there, and then is atomized and then sent into your cylinder so it can be compressed and combusted. So anyway, that's just a quick little deal on how these carburetors work. Now you notice I have all these little plugs here, these little brass plugs. You have to take these out to properly rebuild your carburetor, and you have these drill bits. Let me put my glasses on so I can see. These little drill bits here, which this is a number 40 drill bit, and this is a number 53 drill bit. And these are designed to go down through where all these brass plugs are, and you drill out all these little passages by hand. You don't want to put them in a drill and go down there and go through something you don't want to, but it gets all the old gas and rust and crud that builds up down in there. You need to do that if you want to make sure you put this back together properly. So that being said, let's put the carburetor back together. So we'll start here with the choke. This is what they call the choke door. This is the one with the big hole in it that goes on the top. So first, we take the choke lever and slide that through. Can you see the little slot in there? Let me see if I can get that on camera. That little slot is where this is going to fit through. So we slide this in. Then we take the choke plate, or door, excuse me. We slide that in. Then we get these little holes lined up. You can see how that fits in there. We get these holes lined up, and these little screws here will go inside there to hold that in place. Sometimes easier said than done. Let's see, where's my pick? Here we go. Okay, now you can see the little screws are in there, and I'll tighten those up. There are little lock washers that go on there as well, and you want to make sure that you have those on there. And you want to tighten this really tight because you do not want these to come loose. If let these come out and go down in your engine, that's going to ruin your day, guaranteed. Get a little bigger screwdriver here. Okay, now this bolt goes in here. It's going to limit the throw of the choke. Too tight. There's a little spring on there, and this basically controls the tension, but there's your choke opening and closing. I have to work on that a little bit. So anyway, that's your choke, which actually, this is the way it sits. That's fully open, that's fully closed. So now we're going to put the throttle in, and it's the same thing. It has a plate like this and these two little screws that hold it on. This goes through here. I did put new bushings in here. There's also a little felt here that goes on there to kind of make a little bit of a seal. So when you slide this in here, it's kind of a tight fit. And you want to make sure that that felt goes inside of there. Give it a little push. Okay, same thing. This one's being a little more stubborn. Screw holes lined up. Okay, that's in there. Then we'll put the little screws on. Hold it in place. Like I said, make sure you have those little lock washers on there. You do not want to lose those or any of these parts. Do not want them going down into your carburetor or into your engine. Get it to start. The hole's not quite lined up. There we go. Drop it. Started. Okay. So it's a bigger screwdriver. All right. And there we have our throttle door installed. Two little screws holding it in place. Okay, so Now, the rest of the carburetor body, we're going to put, this is the economizer valve. There's a little gasket goes on there too, make sure you have that on there. Okay. And we'll put our power and our idle adjustment screws in here. And just FYI, the the load one is the longer of these two. It's just slightly longer, maybe 1/4 of an inch. And it even says right there on the carburetor, load adjustment. And then our idle adjustment. Okay, so we've got that in. Now, that pretty much does everything for the body. This right here also will need to go in, but I've ordered another one of these. I tried to JB weld this little tube on here because it came off, but one thing you want to make sure is you get all those little tiny holes cleaned out. So that's got to be pounded out, and this is that nozzle that's going to go in here like this with the little tube facing the choke side, which is here. So it goes in like that. I'm not going to put it in because I got a new one coming. So now for the float bowl, set this aside. Here's the float bowl. We're going to take our float. We've got a new float pin, and I've taken the pliers and crimped down on these two little pieces right here to make this tight, because you don't want to have any play in there where your float can go side to side and hang up on the wall. So you want to make sure that that gets in there tight. So we're going to put that in, and then our needle valve is going to go in this little slot. Now remember from the last video, this is going to come up, there's a little seat in there, and this is what shuts your fuel off. As the float comes up, it shuts your fuel off. So, but we'll get this put in first, the float. Too far. There we go. And then these go on the ends to hold that float pin in place. One on each side. There's also a little gasket on there. Make sure you have those on there. These up. Those are in there. We get our float. Now we'll take our needle valve and put in that into the two little hooks there. Okay, you can see it kind of leaning over there, but when that comes up, that's going to move that float up and down. It's going to come into this seat. There's also a gasket for this. Make sure you put that on. What else? Hang it up. There we go. This is a 5/8 socket. Okay, we got that tightened down. Now our float can move up and down in there. And the way you check that is there's a gauge. If you can see right here, when you have this turned upside down, this will come down to here, and that has to measure a 1/2 inch. So that's how you know you got the float travel. And if it doesn't come down far enough, you can bend that little piece in there till you get it adjusted where you want it. So this is going to be coming back apart because I have to replace this main nozzle. So anyway, I'm just kind of showing you how it goes back together. I'm also waiting on a couple of screws for this passage and that passage that'll plug that up. Those were drilled out as well with these drill bits. So anyway, once we have that put together, this make sure I put it in there the right way. Don't forget the gasket, otherwise you're going to leak. So the float bowl gets put on like that, and there's another gasket which I'm waiting on that goes on this big nut. So this is just temporarily on there. This is the drain petcock to drain the fuel out of the float bowl after you shut the tractor down. Oop, there goes. It's in there tight, so this, you just want to get it centered before you tighten this nut down, which we're not going to do yet. So